As Janet said, my name is Peter Prinsen. I'm a Senior Manager with Teacher Development and Certification. That's the branch that, as you can imagine, deals with certification. So I'm going to share with you, I have a whole passel of slides, and we don't have to go through all of them. We can stop anytime. But my intent is to give you some background about certification, what's required, the process of certification, and a couple of important, what I consider important little pieces that would be good to remember. Now, having said that, good to remember, I mean, you have busy lives right now, and some of the stuff I'm going to be saying you're going to forget. The good news, and I'll show you that as well, everything that you need to know about certification, all the forms you need, all that kind of stuff is online. You can access it very easily. You can apply online. So all the stuff that I'm going to say, it's there. A couple of things I'm going to start off with is just a few statements, a few famous quotes. This one you may have heard about or you may not. This is from the Supreme Court of Canada. This is a judgment, and I'll do a little bit of talking about that if we have time later on. But the Supreme Court of Canada in 1996 made this statement: teachers hold a special role in the life of young people. In our society, the role of teacher is second in importance only to the parent. Now that's a statement from the Supreme Court of Canada. That's a very powerful statement when you think about that. The profession you're in, and I think certainly where you are right now in your program, you probably realize the importance of being a teacher. And because it's such an important profession, it's also a regulated profession. And that's why we have the certification process, and that's what I'll be explaining to you, of course. I don't know if you've heard this one before, but I like it. I wasn't around when Henry Adams said it, but I was around when I first heard it in my teacher preparation program, and it always stuck with me. A teacher affects eternity. He can never tell, it's a little bit dated, she can never tell where his influence stops. You all have had teachers in your lives, and you know how teachers have influenced you. I bet you each one of you, if you have, maybe already in some of your classes, have told stories about teachers who were special in your lives. They have affected you to the point that they'll probably, because of the way you are, is partially the result of being a teacher, or of being taught by teachers. You're going to pass some of that on to your children and to your grandchildren and so on and so on. So it's really quite an amazing profession when you think how much of an influence we have. Okay, so we're responsible for the certification. Now, here's a couple of things I just want to draw your attention to. We deal with certification. One of the confusions that often happens is that when students, or not students, but when you go into the classroom, when you have a job, you have a contract. And there's different types of contracts. It's important to remember that contracts are conditions of employment that are between you and your jurisdiction, your board. The government, teacher development certification, we have absolutely nothing to do with contracts, other than there's some statements in the School Act, but we have nothing to do with contracts. Contracts deal with employment. We only deal with the certification of teachers. We get phone calls, many of them all the time. If you have contract questions, these are questions you want to deal with the HR people in the school jurisdiction where you're going to be working. Okay, so you all have to meet the regulations of the key document, and you've probably already heard that many times. The key document, the foundational document, is the Teaching Quality Standard. In the back there, I've put out a copy of the Teaching Quality Standard and invite you to take one with you. This really should be part, and I know that the university here used to have it on a bookmark. I don't know if they still do. Yeah. U of L is very good that way with working with the Teaching Quality Standard. So this might be a bit redundant, but this is a good thing to keep in your personal file so that you can refer to it, because it will come up quite often. And of course, the key principle in the Teaching Quality Standard is that quality teaching is built on a solid foundation of KSAs, knowledge, skills, and attributes. How many of you are familiar with those terms? You make my heart just glow. It's amazing and scary what a bureaucrat gets excited about, eh? Maybe I should tell you a little bit about myself just to give you some credibility. I am a bureaucrat. That doesn't always give a lot of credibility. But I've been a teacher for about 35 years, or been an educator for 35 years. I've been a principal for a good chunk of that time, as well as some other administrative roles. So I've been out of the classroom now for about 4 years, working with the department. My role as a teacher has been primarily in junior high or upper elementary. I did some upper elementary teaching when I was a principal because just to become more aware of elementary. So a good chunk of my time has been in junior high, some in upper elementary, and a good piece of it as a school principal. So that's my connection to you, not the bureaucratic part. So if you have any questions about what you can anticipate in school when you get a full-time contract, ask those questions too. But again, with the great program you have here, I think you're finding out all those kinds of things already just by virtue of the program that you're in. Okay, the teaching quality standard. It does a number of things. It guides the teacher preparation institutions in their work of delivering education programs to you. It guides beginning teachers as they pursue their initial development, experienced teachers in their ongoing professional development, and all teachers in their daily teaching practice. You're probably familiar with the teaching quality standard as being divided up into two parts. There is the part for the interim professional certificate, so the beginning teacher, and then there's the second part, which is for permanent professional certification. So the KSAs in the interim piece of the teaching quality standard are the knowledge, the skills, and the attributes that you would be expected to carry with you when you graduate from this program, and that you would be developing and that would be growing in your first couple of years as you move on to a permanent professional certificate. A policy that comes out of that is the teacher growth supervision and evaluation policy. And I don't have my notes here, but that's fine. Under this policy, there are some accountabilities. Are you familiar with this policy at all? This is something you may not be as familiar with. Okay. It will guide your professional development. It will guide also your initial evaluations for when you want to be ready for your permanent professional certificate. So under the policy, each teacher is responsible for, again, meeting the standard as stated in the teaching quality standard, developing, implementing, monitoring, and reporting on his or her individual annual professional growth plan. Again, you may be aware of that. Every teacher is expected to develop a professional growth plan, and then and share that growth plan either with the school principal or in some cases with there might be a professional development team in the school, to share that at the beginning of the year and then discuss the results at the end of the year. Okay, so that's an important piece of it. And then participating in any supervision, evaluation, and as appropriate, any remediation activities. So that's how you as a teacher are held, or you as teachers are held accountable under the teacher growth supervision and evaluation policy. The school boards and the principals are held accountable because under the policy, you will be evaluated for your permanent professional certificate. And I'll get to that in a minute as well. Two formal evaluations at a minimum are required, and that is stated in that teacher growth supervision evaluation policy. Okay, so what do you need to be certificated? Well, evidence of being qualified professionally. And one of the great things is that if you're an Alberta graduate, which you will be, if you graduate from an Alberta teacher preparation program, you will be qualified professionally. Okay, that is part of the program because of the teaching quality standard. Evidence of right to employment. And evidence of being a fit and proper person. So I'm just going to briefly go through these three items. Your dean, Dr. O'Day, will attest that you indeed have met the requirements of the teaching quality standard. You have the ability to apply, that you've gone through a program that will lead you to giving you the ability to apply the KSAs of the standard, use reason, judgment in applying the KSAs, and you've had a foundation of knowledge, theory, and experience upon which to base professional growth. So what happens is when you graduate, Dr. O'Day is going to send us, our office, a list with your names on it, and by virtue of that list, you will be eligible for certification. You'll have to jump through a couple of hoops I'll talk about. You do have to apply, but you don't have to send any transcripts. You don't have to do any of that kind of thing. You've graduated from the University of Lethbridge, and therefore you qualify professionally for interim certification. Now, here's an important piece. Some students, and this reminder I'm going to bring up twice. Some grads want to travel after being stuck in a university program for anywhere from 4 to 6 years. Finally, you're free and you can do something and you can travel. Or perhaps you want to teach somewhere else. You've gone to the U of L, it has a good reputation, so you've taken your teacher education program here, but you may want to teach in Saskatchewan or in Ontario or Newfoundland or out of the country in one of the major nations around the world. When you're gone, that's fine, but Dr. O'Day's attestation, that list that she's going to send in, it's only good for 5 years. So if you don't get your certificate within 5 years, it's not that you're not going to get a certificate, it just means that you're going to have to apply and there's going to be a few hoops you jump through, and it's just going to be more of an annoyance. So just bear that in mind, that the dean says, yes, you've gone through that program, you've done it well, you should get a certificate, but that's only good for 5 years. All right? And just to complicate things, because we are government after all, so we can't make things too straightforward, your interim professional certificate, which is the first one, and I'll talk about that, it's good for 3 years. So your interim professional certificate is good for 3 years, the dean's attestation is good for 5 years. We're seeing if we can throw anything else in there just to make it a little bit more difficult. But actually, we are trying to clean it up. But that's the way it is right now. So that's a bit of a confusion, but do bear that in mind. And this is just standard stuff. You commit to the quality, 4 years university, proficiency in a language. Evidence of right to employment, or right to employment in terms of your status in Canada. So you have to be in Canada. Basically what that means is legally, and you'll have to give some evidence of that. So if you've immigrated from another country, I don't think you could have gotten into the program if you weren't here legally. I think there's catches all the way through, but just bear in mind that there is that. You don't have to be a citizen, but you do have to have legal status in the country. Okay, a fit and proper person. Now, this is another statement from that same Supreme Court decision. Teachers are not able to choose which hat they will wear on what occasion. Teachers do not check their teaching hats at the schoolyard gate and may be perceived to be wearing their teaching hats even off duty. You are held to a higher standard. You are, in many ways, on duty 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. What happened here was that there was a teacher who apparently was an excellent teacher, had good rapport with the kids, was just a very good teacher. He had one slight drawback. He was a rabid anti-Semitic person. But he never, ever espoused his views in the classroom. And that was documented, that was proven, there was no issue about that. But he had his own, he would get on the radio. 1996, after all. Couldn't go on his blog. He had these radio shows, those call-in shows that they have. He would go on there and he would go do his rant. He published little leaflets that he would pass around. And around that time, cable stations had those programs that you could sort of buy a half hour or do a half hour, do your own little shtick in there. He would get on that sometimes. So one of the school boards in I think it was New Brunswick, fired him. And he took it all the way to the Supreme Court because he said, look, I'm a good teacher, I have great evaluations. No one has ever said, and quite the opposite, I don't espouse my views in the classroom. What I do in my private time is my own business. And the courts obviously said, finally, no, it's not. It is not your business. You affect students even when you're out of the classroom. Now, that's a pretty extreme situation. Some of you probably, right now already, are in rural communities where there might be other things that are sort of no-nos. And I don't know what those might be, but if it's a conservative community, being seen walking out of a bar on a school night or something might be something that would not be looked on very well. Be aware of those things. That's not going to infringe on your certificate, but just in terms of an employment matter, be conscious of that because, yes, you are on duty 24/7. You're held to a higher standard. Any questions on that? How many kind of figure that was the case anyways? Okay, well now you know. A couple more things about fit and proper person. Okay, on a random basis, when your application goes in for a certificate, on a random basis, you will, first of all, you have to sign a declaration that we can do a criminal record check on you. And then on a random basis, we do criminal record checks. If it turns out that, first of all, you said, no, I don't have a criminal record, and you do, well, that's not good. If you do have a criminal record, make sure you report it. Having a criminal record does not mean you're not going to get a certificate. The registrar bases his judgment on whether or not you're going to get your certificate in terms of the fit and proper person on three things, if there's a criminal conviction. Recency, frequency, and seriousness. Okay, those are the three criteria that the registrar uses. How recent was the criminal conviction? Is there a frequency? Is there more than one criminal conviction? And what is the nature of that criminal conviction? So let me give you an example. If when you turned 18 and you went out with your friends and you were drinking and you figure I can drive home, you get pulled over and you're charged with drinking under the influence. Well, that's an issue. You've got a criminal, I should point out, it's not just a conviction. It's a criminal charge. Okay, so we have a lower standard. Even if you've been pardoned, you have to report that. Okay, because again, you're held to that higher standard. So a conviction is certainly part of it, but even if you've been charged with a criminal offense, you have to report that. So if it's a DUI at 18, well, the registrar will probably look at that and say, well, this person is now whatever, 23, 24. So it's quite a long time ago. He or she was 18, and it only happened once. And it is, DUI, which is serious. I have a personal thing about DUI, but, in terms of the range of charges you could get, it's not in there with sexual interference, right? It's a different kind of charge. So chances are the registrar would go ahead and issue the certificate. However, if DUI when you're 18 and now you're in your second year of university, maybe you haven't even started your teacher prep program, and you're charged again. Now the registrar is going to take a close look at that. And he very well may decide, I don't think so. Let's talk to this person. Let's find out what's going on here. So, because now we're getting into frequency. And of course, seriousness. I don't even have to go down that road. If there is a charge of sexual interference, of assault, or any of those kind of charges, that will indeed impact the registrar's decision. Okay, the initial certificate is the interim professional certificate. I recommend that you apply for that 1 to 2 months before you complete your program. As a matter of fact, you can even do it sooner than that, but 1 to 2 months, 2 months is plenty. January, February kind of thing. Because once you apply, then a file is opened up on you, and it just helps expedite that process a little bit. Okay, so apply even before you've graduated. And you won't get your certificate, but there will be a file on you, and once that stuff comes in, then the people in that section can start working on that. I've talked about the dean's recommendation already. Okay, now the interim certificate is issued for 3 years. I mentioned that. It can be extended for 3 years, and it can be reissued as many times as necessary. So the interim professional certificate, it's important. If you are not a Canadian citizen, you will not be able to get a permanent professional certificate. So you would have to get an interim professional certificate renewed, and that can be done indefinitely, as many times as necessary. The catch here is that it has to be done by an employer. So you have to be either have a job or have an offer of a job, because the request for the extension, renewal of an interim professional certificate can't come from you. It must come from a potential employer. How am I doing as a bureaucrat? Am I confusing you nicely? Okay. Now, another important item here. If you decide you're going to teach somewhere else, if you want to teach, again, in Saskatchewan, Ontario, Newfoundland, Montana, Australia, Great Britain, France, almost any country in the world, if you want to teach there, in order to get certified in that country, they will ask, we call it a statement of standing. I think most Canadian jurisdictions, in fact, I think most North American jurisdictions refer to it as a statement of standing. You'll have to have a statement of standing. And what that is your interim professional certificate. Okay? So, if you want to teach in Saskatchewan, and you figure, well, because I'm going to teach in Saskatchewan, I don't need an Alberta certificate, I'm going to save myself, I think it's $200, and you're going to start paying off your student loans and all that kind of nice stuff. You know, $200 is $200. Well, I really encourage you, spend the money, because that way you have your statement of standing and you can get a teaching certificate anywhere else. Okay, that's really quite important. So get your certificate, don't put it off. If you're going to teach somewhere else, they will ask for a statement of standing, and that statement of standing will be the interim professional certificate. Because by virtue of having that certificate, all the stuff in terms of your program, your professional training, your professional status, all that's on file then. Okay, permanent certification. After approximately after 2 years, most of you will qualify, if you've taught full-time, will qualify for a permanent professional certificate. What you need for a permanent professional certificate is to have taught for 2 school years. Sometimes you're going to hear people say, no, it's 400 days. No, it's 2 school years. In the old days, 2 school years meant 400 days. I can't think of any jurisdiction right now that has 400 days or 200 days in 1 school year. They're usually around 196, 195. And then some of the rural schools have even fewer, because they have the Fridays or every second Friday off because of whatever busing or whatever they might do. So they have even less. So it's 2 years. Now, where the 400 days come in is if you are part-time teaching or substitute teaching. Because your substitute teaching does qualify, so keep a record of those days of substitute teaching, even a half day, keep track of that. Your hiring board should do that, but there's glitches everywhere, so keep track of how many days of substitute teaching you do, and count half days. Just count them as per the regulations in the particular district, whatever they decide a half day is. Okay? So you have your 2 years in, or approximately 400 days. You'll be evaluated a number of times. Typically what happens is you're going to have, your principal will have a series of formative evaluations, either in formal or less formal basis, but will work with you in your first couple of years. But at some point in time, he or she will talk to you and say, okay, now we are going to begin the process to evaluate you for your permanent professional certificate. And that has to be 2 evaluations. And then that goes, the principal will then recommend to the superintendent that you be issued a permanent professional certificate, and then the registrar will look at that and will issue it to you under most circumstances. Are any of you thinking of teaching in private schools? Okay. It's the same process. Everything is the same in a private school for all certification matters, except just a little bit of a difference for your permanent professional certificate, because private schools do not have superintendents. They have what's called a designating signing authority. So it'll be someone else that'll come in and do one of those evaluations. So it's just a slight bit different, but for all intents and purposes, the same thing. It's going to be 2 evaluations, a recommendation made to the registrar, and the registrar will issue that certificate. Okay? But everything I'm saying in terms of certification applies to private schools, Catholic schools, and public schools. Okay, so you're going to apply. We already know that. The government being as generous as it is, we've spent a pile of money and we've given you a bookmark now that you don't have time to read. And you've already had a copy of this. So the address that you need, it's up here, but it's also on that bookmark. If you don't have it, it's at the back, so just go ahead and take one. You can apply online, and it's a fairly straightforward process. When you go to Alberta Education, and you can just Google Alberta Education. You don't even have to worry about the address. But once you get there, you'll see that there's a series of tabs up here. You probably can't read them, but department information, students, parents, teachers, administrators, Francais, and then online tools and resources. So you simply click on teachers, and that will bring you to a series of choices. And you just follow the links. So the first choice is the role of teacher, second choice is teaching resources, and then you get to teacher certification, and then under that you'll click on how to apply professional conduct, standards, certification, and more. That's what it actually says on the website. So once you click on that, that'll begin the process for you. It really guides you very well. You consider yourself always, because they'll talk about Alberta graduates. And that's your reference. That's your key phrase. You are Alberta graduates because you have a different process than people that come from out of the province or out of the country. And then you just follow the links. A couple of things you'll be, well, there'll be a whole pile of things you'll have to do, but well, not really, not a whole pile. But there is a whole lot of information there. These are the documents that you'll have to submit. You'll have to print off the application form, sign it, and there's 3 places you sign it. Then you send the money, and you can pay online if you want, or send a check made out to the Minister of Finance. And a photocopy of a Canadian birth certificate or proof of your immigration status in Canada. Now, remember that permanent file when you were kids? The principal used to say, well, this is going to go in your permanent file. Well, there is now actually a permanent file. And all these documents will, in fact, go on your permanent file and your permanent record. They will become part of that record. Okay. And it is permanent. We moved into one building we moved into a while back. They literally had to reinforce the floor. We were on the 12th floor, the top floor of the building. They had to reinforce the floor because of the weight of the paper files. And that's just what we call active files. The inactive files they go somewhere, who knows where. I mean, somebody knows. I definitely don't know. They're archived somewhere. But it's as permanent as anything can be permanent. All this information, like I said, is on the website. Now, again, an employment issue, we don't deal with employment issues, as I mentioned. So when you have a job, you'll have to submit your original documents to the teacher qualification services with the ATA. And they will look at your documents and they will assess what year you would be paid at, what salary level. Now, in virtually all cases, you'll be starting at a level, this is a 5-year or 4-year? 5. Yeah, so I thought, 5-year. So you'll be starting at a 5-year level. The reason I mention that is there have been occasions where a person qualifies, and it's really rare, but there have been occasions where a person qualifies for a certificate, so the registrar issues the certificate, but the teaching qualification services, because we don't look at your transcript, we don't know how many, we go by the dean's attestation, so we don't look at your transcript. The teaching qualification services does, and on the odd occasion, they've rejected some courses or something because they'd be from, I don't know, some weird university or college in the South Sea Islands or something. I don't know why exactly, but it would be something they would pick up on. Now, remember, anything in government, and also then with the teaching qualification services, anything can be appealed. So, I mean, if you aren't happy with the teaching qualification services, and it's, you will be, it's not going to be a problem. But if something should come up, you can appeal. And that's also true with certification. If, for example, you were refused your permanent professional certificate, if the registrar for some reason decided to say no, you can appeal it. There's a certification appeal committee, and it's a committee made up of ATA, school boards, associations. It's about a 6-member committee, and they are at arm's length from the registrar, and they will hear your appeal and make a decision. And it's not uncommon for the registrar's decision to be overturned. Okay, like he's not in there to win. He's in there to enforce the regulation as he sees fit. Okay, so it's not like it's a law court where he's out to win. He'll present the case, but the Certification Appeal Committee will make the final decision. There is something called the Council of Alberta Teaching Standards. Does all sorts of good stuff. You'll never hear about it, so you don't have to worry about it, and you don't have to worry about it. But one thing that is really one of the best kept secrets, the Council of Alberta Teaching Standards has a website. There is a link there, What's New. And every month a new theme, or pardon me, a new topic is loaded up on that link. Our branch contracts with this particular person, and her and I sit down at the beginning of the year and we look at the issues that we think should be part of the What's New on a monthly basis. She just does a bang-up job. What it is resources to assist new teachers. There's a good one for you right there. And there is such a link. Everything is archived. So if you were to look on, say, that resources to assist new teachers, it's hot linked. So it might have a whole series of government documents. And you can just click onto the document and it'll bring you to the document. Other topics, student portfolios, issues in Aboriginal education, all those kinds of topics, you're beyond having to write papers, I think, but the information there is really very rich, it's very current, and it has links that can be very helpful for you. So I really encourage you to take a look at that. Don't worry about looking at anything else on that website because it's not going to do anything for you. But do take a look at that What's New. Like I say, it's archived and there's some really good stuff in there. Okay? So that's my advertisement, but it's good advertising. And again, you've got this on your free. It's very expensive, by the way, that bookmark, because I had to fly from Edmonton to Calgary, then Calgary to Red Deer, and I had or Calgary to Lethbridge, and then I had to rent a car. So I mean, don't lose the bookmark, okay? Expensive. Ah, yes. And you've probably already heard the old-timers in your school say, oh, well, your life is finished for the next 2 years and next 3 years. Forget having a social life. All that kind of stuff. It used to be that teachers were sort of in a sink or swim mode, and that's what that little cartoon kind of looks at. But hopefully in your districts, certainly in the coming years, in all districts, there is going to be a real emphasis on teacher transition, teacher induction. I think your PS3 is a prime example of induction really working well for teachers. You have your mentors, you have your time is really, you're teaching 50%, so that means you have other time to reflect on your teaching, to do some work, preparing things, working things through. So in a way, you are in a teacher induction program. When you get hired, hopefully you will be into a board that does have a robust teacher induction program that includes many of the things that you're experiencing right now. Working with a mentor, meeting with the admin, having perhaps even a workload that's more recognized. I hate to admit it, but this is the truth. When I was hiring teachers many years ago, the things I looked at were, okay, what's left over, and I need a basketball coach. And that mentality is still out there. So what's left over, and I need this. Well, the department is working very hard with the teacher prep institutions, with the ATA, with the school superintendents, to really work at making sure that a teacher's experience in those first couple of years is an experience that's going to help them grow into the profession. That it's not this throw them into the classroom, close the door, and hope for the best, but that you're going to have some of your supervision duties perhaps, or those kinds of things lessened or recognized or acknowledged, and your teaching load recognized and acknowledged as a beginning teacher. It's not always possible. I mean, the realities are there. Sometimes they do need a teacher to teach grade 4 music, grade 6 French, grade 9 math, and a basketball coach. I mean, that's sometimes what the position is. So that's the reality of it. But we're getting away from the idea of simply thinking, well, whatever's left over is going to be the new hire. That's teacher induction, teacher transition induction, and hopefully you'll be hearing more about that. And really kudos to the university here for the work they've been doing on that. Okay, I've come to a frightening conclusion. I am the decisive element in the classroom. It is my personal approach that creates the climate. It is my daily mood that makes the weather. How many of you have experienced that already when you're coming into the classroom and maybe your mood isn't that great and you've seen the impact of that on the kids, right? I mean, you are the person. You are the key element there. And it's a great profession. I'm hoping that you're having a good time in the work you're doing. It really is a wonderful and worthy profession that you're entering into.